Hello, Tabernacle family. Thank you for joining us for the midweek message. We are continuing through Ecclesiastes. If you go ahead and turn there. Today we'll go through the 6th chapter. So Ecclesiastes chapter 6. Got a good 12 verses to go through here. And without further ado, we'll go through that right now. Verse 1 says this: "There is an evil that I have seen under the sun, and it lies heavy on mankind. A man to whom God gives wealth, possessions, and honor, so that he lacks nothing of all that he desires. Yet God does not give him power to enjoy them, but a stranger enjoys them. This is vanity. It's a grievous evil. If a man fathers 100 children and lives many years, so that the days of his years are many, but his soul is not satisfied with life's good things, and he also has no burial. I say that a stillborn child is better off than he. For it comes in vanity, it goes in darkness, and in darkness its name is covered. Moreover, it has not seen the sun or known anything, yet it finds rest rather than he. Even though he should live 1,000 years twice over and enjoy no good. Do not all go to the same place? All the toil of man is for his mouth, yet his appetite is not satisfied. For what advantage has the wise man over the fool? What does the poor man have, who knows how to conduct himself before the living? Better is the sight of the eyes than the wandering of the appetite. This also is vanity and striving after the wind. Whatever has come to be has already been named, and it is known what man is, and that he is not able to dispute with one stronger than he. The more words, the more vanity. What advantage to the man? For who knows what is good for man while he lives the few days of his vain life, which he passes like a shadow? Who can tell man what will be after him under the sun?" So we are at about the halfway point of the book, and just to kind of remind us where we've been, this phrase, striving after the wind, it's happened a number of times now. You're familiar with it. And really getting into chapter 2 through about 6-9, you have this chunk, and it talks about the futility of toil. And so often you'll have that phrase, striving after the wind, used about this toil for the sake of toil, or for this toil under the sun. And so we've seen its last usage in the book. Verses 10 through 12 really begin to shift our focus towards another major idea in this book, where you're starting to hear these rhetorical questions. Who knows what is good for man? Who knows what will come after the man? And you'll see this in chapter 7 and following from there. So we're sort of at a bridge in the book right now. And this chapter holds them together. We're seeing the former, we're seeing the latter as we go through right here. And it reminds me maybe a little bit of an account that I once heard. Fictional or not, I'll leave it to you to decide. I don't know. And voice 1 says, "We are approaching you and recommend that you turn your course 15 degrees to the south." Voice 2, "You are approaching us. We recommend you turn your course 15 degrees to the north." Voice 1 again, "We are a U.S. naval ship. Turn your course." Voice 2, "No, you turn your course." Voice 1, "This is a U.S. naval ship. We are the Enterprise. We are an aircraft carrier. You turn your course." Voice 2, "We are a lighthouse. The choice is yours." So I feel like that's a little bit how it goes when you come to a text like this, where you are running hard up against reality. Namely, this is my Father's world. Namely, there are certain absolutes in this world. And if you pretend that they're not there, you nonetheless run headlong into them. So behold the lighthouse. And I guess the choice now is ours. Will we act in accordance with God's revealed law and with the natural law that is all about us? Or will we continue, boy, striving after the wind and content in our own limited knowledge? That being in mind, verses 1 and 2, really verses 1 through 6 form the first unit of thought, but it breaks down into a couple of different ideas here. First, the statement here, I've seen this grievous evil under the sun. Remember, this is life lived without God. This is the modern atheistic or agnostic mindset. This is the idea of life within this closed system in which nothing from the outside has permission to act on it. And with this, there's this grievous evil. So here's someone that has accumulated the good life. They've lived the American dream. They have wealth, they have possessions, they have everything that they could possibly want except joy. Because those who live for money will not be satisfied with money. Remember that? We talked about it last week here in the same book. And so you have all of this wealth, and yet you don't have the ability to enjoy it. Furthermore, a stranger enjoys it. Well, why is that the case, and how does that work? It may be because of all these hangers-on. We talked about that last week. Or it may be how we talked about back in chapter 1, that you spend all your life laboring, and yet death is coming. And when you die, you must pass that on to somebody else. And that person who inherits it, who knows whether they'll be a fool or not. Think of Solomon's son Rehoboam. Rehoboam ripped the kingdom. Well, he was a fool. In fact, he even had the privilege of wise, older advisors telling him to do something that he ignored for the sake of his young, foolish advisors. It blew the kingdom in half. The kingdom never recovered from such folly. Well, here it is again. This person who's labored all his life, no power to enjoy it, and no guarantee that this stranger is going to be any wiser than he. It's a grievous evil. Verses 3 through 6 now make this stark comparison. Really, there's two different illustrations, and they're hyperbolic illustrations here. The first one, verse 3, goes like this. Let's pretend that we have in mind the very best that humanity has to offer. All right? If a man fathers 100 children, by the way, that's at stark odds with our current cultural ideal that the good life is abundant and unfiltered and uninhibited sex. At whatever whim, at whatever stage, at whatever cost to others, just the absolute, pure, and unadulterated satisfaction of one's own lust. Well, that was not this culture's ideal. They said, we understand children are a blessing from the Lord. And let's say that we have lots of kids. Okay, well, the idea being that in your culture's imagination, let's ramp it up and get to the very top, okay? Man has 100 kids. He lives many years. The days of his life are just many. He's as good as you can possibly imagine. Verse 3. But his soul is not satisfied with life's good things. Are you satisfied? I mean, isn't that the question? Are you satisfied? What would it look like for you to be satisfied? How nice does your house have to be for you to be satisfied? How many things or how nice of things do you have to have before you're satisfied? It's so easy to paint a target on someone else's back, isn't it? As long as we're not like those people who aren't like us, then we're good. And so when we talk about wealth, all you have to do is find someone who's wealthier than you, and now you're off the hook, right? Because if you have 40,000 or 60,000, well, that's one thing. If you have 140 or 100, oh, those evil people out there. If you make those into 140 million, I mean, some of our professional athletes, what evil people they are. Are they? Are they? Or that person who has 4,000 or 6,000, are they somehow less human? Boy, it just depends on the country you're in. It depends on the circle of life. So rather than making these things really hard and fast numbers, what if you just look at your own heart? Are you satisfied? Maybe if you only had 5,000 more a year, 10,000 more a year, then it would be enough, right? But would it be? What is it that will allow you to have satisfaction? So here's a man who had everything and was not satisfied. It's almost predictable, and yet we're duped so easily. It says here that he has no burial. People get really confused about this. You read the commentators, and some people are so confused about it that they try to make it the stillborn that has no burial. Of course, you have to change the original grammar. I think it's better just to allow the original text to stand. And so it's this rich man who has no burial. And the point is, he's made it to the top of his game, but he dies unsatisfied and unlamented and unremembered. That's the point. You've given your life for things which do not endure. So not even your memory endures. You don't even have a proper burial. Why? Well, maybe you were miserly. Maybe in the course of all your acquisition, you turned some people off. And so now you die the death of an unrepentant Ebenezer Scrooge, if you can imagine. Well, it's better that he had not been born. Verses 4 and 5 are really stark here, and really just describes this stillborn child, this baby who was miscarried. And we all know just the sorrow of such a thing. And here, this writer, Kohelet, the teacher, he says, that young life is better than someone who acquired every imaginable thing in life except for rest. Because this unborn, this stillborn, is at rest. By the way, this also helps us understand what happens to this child who dies before this age of accountability that we talk about. Here, his conscience is not full developed, right? He doesn't have the ability to know right from wrong. And yet, God's word tells us that he has rest. In fact, he has rest in such a way that this rich, unrepentant man does not have rest. And so I take that maybe along the lines of what David says. You know, I will go to him, he cannot come to me. And yet, David is a righteous man who will depart for rest. And granted, as Scripture unfolds, more and more revealed to us. So by the time we get to the New Testament, we know a lot more about what the afterlife will look like. Even here, we're given these glimpses that there is a rest for some. Praise the Lord for that. The second illustration, verse 6. Even though he should live 1,000 years twice over. I mean, think of Methuselah and double it. Think of Adam. He lived 930 years. Double it. Do not all go to the one place. Now we're talking about Sheol, the place of the dead. We're all going to die, it says. So are you satisfied? Verses 7, 8, 9 form a unit. The toil of a man is for his mouth. And as we go through these verses, that word appetite will come up a couple of times. I want you to have that in mind, of desires. It's really kind of the other side of the coin. Are you satisfied? That's because you are desiring right things, and therefore God is satisfying those right things. The psalmist says it this way, that delight yourself also in the Lord. He'll give you the desires of your heart. This is why, yet again in the Psalms, we can say, taste and see that the Lord is good. Or yet again, be still, rest. Know that I am God. All of these things are together in mind. All the toil of a man is for his mouth, and yet his appetite is not satisfied. This is just as true of some hunter-gatherer as it is of the modern man who is walking the constant revolving treadmill of industrial production. The same thing. You are working so hard. Why? So that you can eat. Why? So that you have the strength to continue working, to continue eating. It's a bit redundant. And upon occasion, when we think about it so stark as that, boy, it can be depressing. I've heard people talk about, why should I work so hard to get a good job so I can just get married and kids and die? And what? Isn't there something a bit more than all of this? For what advantage has the wise man over the fool? Well, they're all going to die. And I appreciate that this is brought out, because let's say that you think, okay, well, I'm not going to labor just for materialism. I'm going to labor for knowledge. I'm going to be as smart as I can be. Well, after a while, you get alphabet soup after your name. You got so many degrees and letters. You hang them on your walls. You're such a fancy person. And for what? I mean, what have you gained by all that knowledge? And the point is, not much if it's just to terminate upon itself. What does the poor man who have nothing? He knows how to conduct himself, but what does he have? Elsewhere in Ecclesiastes says, what gain is there? These are rhetoricals we know the answer to. Verse 9, better is the sight of the eyes than the wandering of the appetite. This is vanity, a striving after the wind. If you're constantly looking for what you don't have, the grass always being greener on the other side, he says, no, no, no. What's right in front of your eyes? Maybe today, walk around your home and look. Open your eyes and actually see what is before you. What do you see? You look at the floor. You look at the walls. Maybe you look at the holes in the walls which tell a story. You look at the wrinkles on your face. And if you're young and you don't have them yet, you got something to look forward to. And you look at all these things. Those wrinkles tell a story too, do they not? And look. It's a beautiful day, depending on when you're listening to this. Today's Wednesday. It's a beautiful sunny day. Spring is in the air. Smell it. Look. Better is the sight of the eyes. Because so many people have been complaining, oh, I just wish, because you always complain about the weather, right? Something to do. Well, look what is before you. That's better. Verse 10, we're turning a quarter here, 10, 11, 12. Whatever has come to be has already been named. And it is known what man is, and that he's not able to dispute with one stronger than he. Some interpretation, when you hear that word man, the Hebrew word is Adam, or Adam if you're fancy. The word for soil or ground is Adamah, and so Adam is taken from Adamah. You have this man taken from the dust of the ground. It's very explicit in Hebrew. With all of this, people are taking this to think about the original fall of mankind. So you could maybe translate it this way. Whatever has come to be, it's already been named. Well, who named it? Adam, right? And it's known about Adam, what he is. We know who Adam is. We know what happened there in the fall. And we also know that as good as he was, as much of a representative as he was, knowing that he lived like 10 times longer than we did, 930 years, right? Read Genesis. I think it's Genesis 5. You'll find it there, whatever chapter it is. And as long as he lived, as good as he was, he's not able to dispute with God. Well, let's say you take it out of the particular and you just say, look at mankind in general. You can't dispute with God. The more the words, the more the vanity. And what advantage in all of this? We see it, right? It's kind of like this. Adam named it. All of the philosophers who followed Adam did not substantially add to anything that he has said. Remember, he named all of this naming, all of his wisdom. Nobody's really added anything. You talk about Solomon. Nobody's really come after Solomon and added much. In fact, the more the words, the more the vanity, because after all, who can dispute with God? Now, you find a couple of people. Think back to verses 3 through 6. Remember the comparison of this person to the stillborn? There have actually been some pretty godly men who would have preferred to be stillborn. I want to remind you of Job and all his suffering, and of Jeremiah and all his weeping. And as we have read through those passages, we have at times upbraided them, or at times maybe not understood them well. But the reason is because we have had a value that was superior to all of this under the sun. We have had a value that transcends death. We see God, and in his light, we see light. We've read his word and have come to know. Now comes verse 12. For who knows what is good for man? Well, I know someone who knows what's good for man. His name is Jesus Christ. Then you may know him too. You find him revealed in this word. Who knows what is good for man while he lives the few days of his vain life, which passes like a shadow? Think of James, this mist which is gone. Who can tell man what will be after him? I know someone who can. His name is Jesus Christ. In fact, he died and rose again. So what would it take for you to be satisfied? Well, it must take a viewing of, a perspective of something more than the immediacy of this life, something more than that which is, quote, under the sun, something more than a striving for the wind. Your job can never satisfy you, but you can be satisfied in your job. Your children, your family, precious as they are, can never satisfy you. But I know someone who can. That's why Jesus Christ calls himself the living water. It's this water that satisfies your thirst. That's why he calls himself the bread of life, because your hunger can finally be satisfied. A man works, he toils just for food, right? Just for his appetites. But Christ can satisfy that appetite. We don't work for bread alone. Man is not satisfied by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. The writer, the teacher, the preacher, Kohelet, he's trying to get you to lift your eyes above the sun, trying to lift your eyes above this earth, and so that you might see one who could satisfy your soul. And so the question I'll leave you with today is, will you be satisfied with Christ?